That's my big thing as well. It's not even about Saquon Barkley, but D Wood. You mentioned Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. Kellen Moore is on his third team in 3 years, going from Dallas to Los Angeles and now Philadelphia. Vic Fangio was with Miami, and now he's here in Philadelphia. D Wood, do you believe that these coordinators do have what it takes to get them back to the Super Bowl?
I believe so. I think that, you look at the body of work with Kellen Moore and what he did with the Dallas Cowboys, what he did with the Los Angeles Chargers, and listen, the Chargers situation, obviously was a different situation with the head coach. But I think that he'll be able to provide, Kellen Moore I'm talking about, will be able to provide Jalen Hurts with a lot of answers to the test, because clearly when you watch this Philadelphia team on offense last year, they were very ordinary, very stagnant. They didn't have a lot of answers as far as what teams were doing as far as throwing things at them. I think Kellen Moore will be able to provide some of that for this Philadelphia Eagles offense.
Well, I guess Dallas is trash. Is Philadelphia?
Okay, this whole thing about Kellen Moore is driving me insane. It's so disingenuous to be like, he's on his third team in 3 years, blah, 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 blah. You have to look at the circumstances of what happened. First off, when he was with Dallas, okay, his final 2 years, he had the Cowboys going in top 5 in offense, okay? Dak was playing unbelievable. They actually went further, and Dak played better in the playoffs under Kellen Moore. And the run game was even better. They actually ran the ball more with Kellen Moore than with Mike McCarthy. And then he gets fired for 2 reasons. One, it was widely reported that Mike McCarthy was very much threatened by this young, up-and-coming offensive mind, and the players also liked him. That's number one. And number two, they're also grasping at straws for a scapegoat as to why they suffered humiliating losses in the playoffs, as they kept doing. Like, everyone wants to talk about all the wins and how great they've been, and it's like, well, Kellen Moore is part of that, of those, those successive seasons of them winning all those games. But again, they needed a scapegoat as to why their playoffs, why they weren't producing in the playoffs. And so obviously Mike McCarthy wants to save it, himself. And Jerry Jones also doesn't want to fire the coach either. So it's like, get rid of Kellen Moore. It's the easy decision to go. I mean, who knows? Maybe Nick Sirianni is like the worst coach ever, and like it's a scapegoat for him to fire the coordinators and just be like, this is not my fault. These are the coordinators' fault. But we know that's what coaches do, and owners for that regard. They do that all the time. So it's nonsense to now all of a sudden act like he was not successful with the Dallas Cowboys, because that is absurd. Absurd. And people always going to say, oh, he doesn't run the ball. He doesn't run the ball. The Cowboys literally ran the ball less with Mike McCarthy as soon as Kellen Moore left. So it makes no sense. And then he went to a dying organization of the Chargers, who were in a free fall. Their coach was a lame duck coach. Their coach couldn't even get his own side of the ball correct. And he couldn't even make it through his final season, and he got fired. Of course Kellen Moore is going to be let go in that position. Harbaugh came in. He's not keeping Kellen Moore. They cleaned up shop. They got rid of everyone. So this idea that Kellen Moore was fired because he just failed with the Chargers is also absurd. He did the best that he could considering the circumstances. And there were a lot of injuries last year. And yet, before all those injuries started to pile up, he had the offense going very well. The offense wasn't the problem. It was more the defense, if anything. So it's just like an unfair representation of what Kellen Moore can do and who Kellen Moore is. It's very reminiscent of Cliff Kingsbury. Like, he totally turned around Arizona and had them humming, had them winning games, had them in the playoffs, had them, up for contention. Like number 1 seed, like all this type of stuff. I don't think they officially had the number 1 seed, but they had the number 1 seed for a while. And then like Kyler Murray got injured. And then there was like all these cluster injuries. And, Cliff is using a backup of a backup of a backup. The defense is injured. Offensive weapons are injured. Ownership is notoriously awful. The GM like left for personal reasons. I don't know really what those were. And like everyone just wants to blame Cliff Kingsbury, because it was like, what was he supposed to do? Like what do you want him to do under those circumstances? So we just love to pick and choose who we want to blame for various things. But it's just like really funny to me when people want to act like Kellen Moore. Like when he was with the Cowboys, he was being praised game after game after game for what he did with this offense and what he did with Dak Prescott. And they were just saying like, oh my God, the sky's the limit, the sky's the limit. And then they had 2 embarrassing back-to-back playoff exits, and they needed to blame someone, and he got the blame. Like that's the way it happens. I mean, like we see those things happen all the time. It's just so this idea that fans then want to jump on that narrative, and even like people in the media, like it's so disingenuous to act like Kellen Moore got fired in Dallas because he was incompetent at his job. Even if you want to say that he's not the most elite coordinator ever, which that's fine, you can totally make that argument. But to act like he was incompetent and just not good enough, and that's why he was fired in Dallas, is disingenuous. To act like he was just not good enough, and that's why he got fired with the Chargers, is disingenuous. Those were 2 very, very, very specific circumstances, with 2 franchises that haven't done anything in decades. And now we're going to use those successes or failures as like a barometer for how good someone is? Come on. That's absurd. Now the Chargers are a place of, if someone succeeds there or fails there, we know if they're good or bad. If they fail there, that, you know, what are we talking about here? They should have fired their coach 2 years ago, but they left him around. It was like, that was an absurd hire in the first place to ever even hire him. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. Them getting Harbaugh was finally them doing something that was smart. They finally recognized what they were doing. So I just totally reject this, and I just think, like, why can't we have an honest conversation around Kellen Moore? Like, it doesn't have to be extreme. Again, this video might come off as me trying to act like Kellen Moore is, like, on the level of Shanahan or something, or McVay, or any of these other guys, and that's not what I'm arguing. I'm arguing more than anything that he's going to just to be a massive step up from what the Eagles had last season. Therefore, Jalen Hurts in the offense is going to be significantly better. That's really the argument that I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to say, oh my God, Kellen Moore's here. The dude's a super genius. He can do anything. He's going to, you know, they're going to be now like the 49ers or McVay and the Rams or, you know, Andy Reid. Like, that's not the argument here. But it was very clear that the offensive coordinator, unfortunately, was just not very competent and a bad play caller. We know from experience who Kellen Moore is, and if you actually look at his legitimate resume and look beyond just the surface level stuff of, oh, he got fired, or oh, well, look what happened in with the Chargers in LA, you can realize that when he has a good roster, when he has when he has freedom to act and is supported within a franchise, he is wildly successful. That's indisputable. You can't argue that. And let's stop using, because people also want to argue that the Cowboys last season, they're like, well, Dak played his best year and they got even better when he left. They played awful teams, okay? They beat up on awful teams, ran up the score, and played really, really good against awful, awful, awful teams. And then when they played good teams, they didn't play so great. So this idea that Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys had just like the greatest offense last year is just also absolute insanity. And they want to, again, use that as a say to be like, see, I told you Kellen Moore isn't good. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. Not to mention, it's not like they threw out the entire playbook and any of the stuff that Kellen Moore instilled within the Dallas Cowboys. It's not like they just completely started from scratch and that offense was just wildly different moving forward. That's not accurate either. So the whole conversation around it is just messy and quite frankly absurd to me. I think the Eagles are going to be in a great position with Kellen Moore. I think he's going to get that offense humming along greatly, and I think Jalen Hurts is going to look significantly better. And and then all of a sudden people are going to then now try to be like, well, it's not Jalen Hurts, it's actually Kellen Moore, right? Like they want to blame Jalen Hurts last season for not playing well, and then they want to bash Kellen Moore saying that he's not a good coordinator. But watch when that offense starts humming along and Jalen Hurts is putting up stats, they're going to say, well, it's actually just his roster and the OC. Like, it's just funny. They always want to pick and choose who they want to praise and who they want to blame whenever it's most convenient for whatever the heck they're trying to sell you. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you think Kellen Moore is actually a good OC, or do you think, nope, he's been fired all these places for a reason? Do you think they're going to be successful? He's going to be successful with the Philadelphia Eagles, or do you think, nope, it's going to be more of the same as last season? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of, and I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.